Welcome back to another episode of Sound Pals Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hey guys.
And today we're going to be reviewing Young Frankenstein. And just fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. An American grandson of an infamous scientist struggling to prove that his grandfather was not insane, as people believe, is invited to Transylvania, where he discovers a process that reanimates a dead body. My first pro is that this is a Mel Brooks comedy movie, which it is honoring the Universal monster movies, especially all the Frankenstein movies that we've seen before. They even used the original equipment set from the original Frankenstein movie, and they rented it from Ken Stigfonen, who was the creator of the elaborate equipment that we see they used to bring life to the monster. Also, you notice when Elizabeth, who was played by Madeline Kahn, close to the end, her hair changes to play homage to the Bride of Frankenstein. And also, Mel Brooks really fought for this movie to be filmed in black and white because the studios wanted it to be in color, but he wanted it to be in black and white to play homage to the Universal monster movies. My next pro is the cast. We have comedy legend Gene Wilder, who plays Frederick Frankenstein. We also have Marty Feldman, who plays Igor, or should I say Igor. Then we have Terry Garr playing Inga. Then we have Cloris Leachman, who plays Frud Blucher. The young people might know her as the grandmother from Malcolm in the Middle. Unfortunately, she recently passed away in January 27th at age 94. She was a very comedic woman, and she has come out in multiple roles as a comedian. Also, another cast member from Malcolm in the Middle is Kenneth Mars, who plays the Inspector Kemp. Most people remember him as Otto from Malcolm in the Middle. Moving on, we have Peter Boyle, who played the monster. People remember this actor from Everybody Loves Raymond. He played the father of Raymond. Last but not least, we also have the incredible Gene Hackman, who plays the blind man in this movie. That's a really funny Easter egg right there. So as you can tell, we have a very strong cast in this movie, and not to say that they're all comedic. They're very influential, and I believe they just wanted to be in a Mel Brooks movie. So my next pro is that this is a comedy movie, of course, and it's a Mel Brooks comedy movie. So we have to expect cheesy jokes, and there are plenty of them in this movie. I enjoyed most of them, to tell you the truth. And some of the jokes fell short, but overall, I enjoyed most of them. From the Frankenstein and Igor to the werewolves, their wolves, and their house. That joke was pretty funny to me. Even the blind man, when he says his line at the end, "Where you going? I was going to make espresso." They're one-liners that make you chuckle depending on the actor or character who said it. It brings another element to it, and I know a lot of people don't find them funny, but it's just the way they delivered the lines. And even to the musical number of Putting on the Ritz, I just had fun with that scene. To me, it was out of nowhere, and it was kind of fit into the movie, but at the same time stood out as a sore thumb. For my last pro on my list, I want to talk about the set design and costume. It actually felt like I was watching a Universal monster movie. For example, the set felt like it was from the movie Dracula with Lugosi, and it felt like it was due to the white lens they used to film and also the lighting. So I really liked that aspect of the film, that it reminded me of the movies back in the day. Also the costumes, they kind of paid attention to how they looked, but also they kind of kept it a little modern. So I kind of give them props for that. Now moving on to my cons. The transitions did not feel that smooth. It actually felt like the movie was a bunch of skits, and some jokes did not age well, while others still landed and held up. Also, this movie had big name cast. Sometimes it felt like they wanted to fight for the screen time, or they wanted to basically outdo each other with jokes. And there is a lot of ad-lib in this movie, some lines that were not supposed to be there and stuff. But overall, I think if they concentrated more on the story, they could have made it flow a little better. To me, it just seems like it was cut and paste, and they probably took a bunch of other parts that didn't work. So overall, I really enjoyed this film. I even listened to the commentary from Mel Brooks, and that added another level to my experience, that he talked about behind the scenes and stories that he shared of the cast and just information that we did not know of. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to my friend Touly, see how he saw this movie and what grade he gave the movie.
So as Sal put it, a lot of big names when it comes to the actors and actresses in this film. I'm just going to point out Gene Wilder just because when I saw him for the first time in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I thought to myself, man, this dude, the way he acts and the sort of character he plays, like it's so out there and unique. And I could say the same thing here in Young Frankenstein, where again, he's playing one of these characters that it's so defined in its role. I mean, I just have to give credit to the sort of mentality he has to have for the way he expresses himself and his mannerism to the way he speaks. It just works. and I have to give props to the guy. And again, this is not to take away from any of the other actors and actresses who were in this film who also did a fabulous job in their role. I just wanted to come out and say that personally because I'm a big fan of Gene Wilder. But in terms of the story, it wasn't overly complicated in terms of like being able to follow along. It is, for the most part, a comedy film, so even if you weren't as tuned in to the story, you could get away with just watching it for the jokes, for the laughter and stuff. And for me, it actually worked for the most part. I would say like the sort of comedy that was presented in this film, I tend to gravitate more towards this sort of a style, which in a way sort of reminds me of Airplane, a movie that Sal and I reviewed a while back. But I think the thing that works for me more in this film in terms of the comedy versus Airplane is not that the jokes in Airplane did not hit or miss, but more so on the pacing of these comedic aspects. I found like the pacing of the jokes that were being told on Airplane was just overwhelming, where it was just joke after joke after joke. Whereas a movie like Young Frankenstein, yes, there were a couple of scenes where, we got one joke after another, but there was like overall a good pacing in between. Oh, here's the joke, and then here's a little story or a little something that just brings you back down to earth, so to speak. And then, that'll set you up for the next joke or whatever. So I enjoyed the pacing of how these jokes were being told. And, to go alongside with some of these comedic skits that just landed for me. For example, from the dart scene in which they overly exaggerated how the darts were being thrown through the window and, hitting one of the officer out there, and the wheels to the iconic Frau Blücher and the horse yelping because they feared or they didn't find that name appealing. So I really enjoyed scenes like those in the movie. And I think the movie was a little over an hour and a half, which was fine. I think the pacing was alright, although I feel like a couple of scenes could have been added to give the movie context, and I feel like this is sort of bleeding into maybe the cons of the movie for me, in that I feel like a couple of the scenes didn't really tie well in together, and I had to accept what happened in the upcoming scenes based on predisposition or being able to just think of like a logical reason as to why this scene is the way it is now. For example, at the beginning of the scene, in the classroom scene, where one of the students kept on nagging at the time, Mr. Frankenstein, about his grandfather and the whole idea of reanimating an undead, we saw how annoying Gene Wilder's character was. And to me, when I saw that, I thought to myself, okay, he's no way going back to being like his grandpa or something like that. But rather that, we see him boarding a train to Transylvania. So what I would have liked to see there is, even though he felt frustrated about the whole conversation he was having with his student, that there could have been a scene where maybe he went back to his office or something and he just started thinking about the possibility of reanimation. And then we transitioned to the train scene, because then I would have got, oh, okay, maybe he did feel interested in this issue but didn't want to bring it to the forefront because it would paint himself in a bad light given his family history. So again, I had to just connect the dots myself in thinking that, okay, maybe, and as the movie pointed out later, that it was in his blood. There was no way for him to not do this. So I just accepted it for that reason. It's like, okay, even if the movie did not give me that scene for me to understand why he suddenly shifted from gear 1 to like gear 4, I just accepted it for what it was. But it would have been nice to have that scene though. Another thing that I would have liked the movie to ease me into was how the town folks around Transylvania, how they did not feel comfortable with Frankenstein being in their presence because it was going to lead to the birth of a monster. So you get this town hall meeting all of a sudden, and then them expressing their anxiety, their concerns, and then they decided to storm the castle. Well, that scene happened way too late for my taste, because I feel that if Frankenstein was in their presence and they already knew about it from when he arrived, that there should have been a mad panic already. So for it to have happened once Frankenstein and his crew was already in the process of reanimating this dead body, I feel like there was something missing there. Had a villager caught them doing what they were doing somehow. I know in this movie they had one of the officers sort of like be there when they were bringing back the dead body, but they got away with it. There wasn't any sense of like suspicion going on. Had they just shown something to lead to the villagers being as worried as they were, then again, I would be able to connect the dots more easily. But at the same time, I understand why they would be concerned. Again, just tying back to the family blood. So it's things like those. I feel like it's my biggest concern about this film. The way they shifted from one scene to the next, I feel like a couple of them should have had a little more context to them so that it just flows better. But then again, that would also add to the length of the film. So I don't know if that was a concern for Mel Brooks when it came to making the movie, but I would have preferred it to be a little bit longer and just have those little extra scenes in the movie. But overall, again, story was pretty simple to follow, and the whole idea of a monster, as the town folks put that creature, how he became civilized at the end with what happened, to Dr. Frankenstein giving a part of himself up so that somebody else, that is his creation, could have a life of its own, and that people can accept that creature for it being an actual living entity. And again, although this movie does have a comedic feel to it, the sort of topics that arise after reflecting about what I've seen could lead to serious conversations. So I could appreciate that, even though again, it's more about the comedy and how that sort of drove the movie from start to finish. I would recommend this film to people if you haven't seen it. Again, I enjoy the comedy, the story, simple enough to follow, but at the same time, giving you ideas to ponder about. Oh, and one thing, and this is being very nitpicky, it's because I play the violin that I noticed this. The way they were playing the violin, the bowing that was being performed seemed to have matched up with the sort of notes that you were hearing. So that I don't have a complaint about for the most part. But the song that they were playing had vibratos in some of the notes. And in order to create that sort of a sound, the hand that's holding the violin, in this case, Gene Wilder and Fur Blücher, they were holding it with their left hand. It has this moving action to it in order to cause that vibrato to happen. So when I noticed that the hand wasn't moving, I immediately thought, oh, okay, they're not doing this right. But again, that's just me being nitpicky. But overall, I like the film, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
So I saw it the same way as you did. I'm also going to give it an 8 out of 10 for me. I recommend it to people who have not seen a Mel Brooks movie. This is probably the one I would start them off with. So that does it for this review of Young Frankenstein. Please join us next time where we're going to review Inside Man.
I'll come right to the point. I have a small problem which requires someone with very special skills and complete discretion. Are you such a person, or have I been misinformed?
Go on.
Can I pick you up in front of your office building in 5 minutes?
I'll be downstairs.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.